go away. I'll relish any time you'll stay with me, my dear.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the archaeologist who had to change professions?
No, why?
Her career was in ruins.
Hey.
What?
I'm the dad joke guy around here.
Sorry, Father.
Turn that radio dial.
What you talking about, Wood?
It's time for the most Gen X podcast there is.
Real tomato ketchup?
Not even close. Right.
You found it.
Never been so happy in my whole life.
It's just Jeff and the dazzlingly uncool.
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
Those aren't pillows.
And now, it's just Jeff.
Happy New Year, Jeff.
Well, same to you, man. How was your holiday and your New Year?
You know, it was all right. It was pretty low-keyed. I saw a girl at work today that asked how my holidays were, and I said, well, you know, it was fun. It was nice. It was not a lot going on. She goes, yeah, it was pretty much just like any other day, just with more candy. I was like, yeah, I guess that's true.
And how old is this coworker?
She's probably in her late 20s.
Hey, man, just like some candy, huh?
Like some candy.
Know, it's really a pretty good observation if you think about it, because
I liked it. I remembered it.
I mean, you know, we always talk about if ifs and buts for candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
That's
she was
right.
just a couple of nuts away from having the time of her life.
We'd all be fine and dandy.
We'd be fine and dandy.
Like a hard candy Christmas.
Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker.
So I guess we should have said, Merry New Year.
Excuse me?
Merry New Year!
Rocky, it's Happy New Year. In this country, we say Happy New Year.
And that brings us to the best New Year's movie of all time.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And I think it's kind of a Christmas movie, but we can discuss that as well.
And we're talking about, of course,
Trading Places.
Yeah.
Which I've often wanted to do with you a time or two.
Well,
but you don't seem to want to play along.
Some other people might have something to say about that too.
Well,
but you know, this was
Or now, are you talking about your wife or your patients? Because they hey, you're not Dr. Seal. Just pretend I am. There's nothing. What are your credentials? I ate a corn dog before I came in. I don't know.
I worked for the Dukes. Trading Places, The Prince and the Pauper in 80s culture.
That was a great movie.
Prince and the Pauper?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, you liked that one, I remember.
Now, so is The Prince and the Pauper, is that based on that story? I mean, I always thought about The Prince and the Pauper.
I'm sure the Prince and the Pauper, I don't even know who wrote that. Mark Twain wrote something like, I don't know. But that's an old story, a tale as old as time, they might say. So, you know,
Michael Caine with an appearance on our podcast.
You just, you wonder, like, did this person who is in this position of power and influence, is it because they're so much better than the person who's not in that? Or if you were to swap the roles, you know, AKA Freaky Friday it,
right.
Would it, would one do just as well as the other in the role with influence and power, and would the other just pretty much digress to the level of the street urchin if placed in that position, right? It's
like you said, it's a tale as old as time.
It's a song as old as rhyme.
Man alive, you're a wordsmith today.
I'll tell you how I did it when you're older.
Yes. That's we can kind of do that real quick.
Angela
Michael Caine
Lansbury?
can ask. That wasn't Angela Lansbury. Michael Caine ask Sean Connery a yes or no question.
Sean, would you say that you are the best looking person in England?
Yes.
Damn it, man, you're Scottish.
Anyway, so we've come to the conclusion that it's like The Prince and the Pauper, which I don't know enough about it, but I'm guessing they switched roles kind of like that because it wouldn't make sense. But in Trading Places, there was definitely a social experiment that was done and backfired.
Oh, did it ever? As it usually does in these stories, yeah.
It usually does. It usually does. But that was just an awesome movie from start to finish.
It really was a good movie, you know. I mean, fantastic cast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Obviously, Dan Aykroyd, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Amici, Ralph Bellamy.
Yeah.
And
whoever the butler was, I don't know his name, but he's in many things.
He's a butler in many, many movies.
Yep.
And then, of course, you know, a rather early introduction, not, you know, into the big screen for Eddie Murphy. Not his first movie, but
I think introduction to the big screen as the headliner. I wouldn't be surprised if his name was listed first in the credits. I think he was probably the biggest name at that time.
yeah, he had 48 Hours under his belt. He
Before
had
that-
Saturday Night Live under his belt. Yeah.
Well, like you just said, the big screen. You know, he was riding hard on Saturday Night Live. I mean, he was hot. And I didn't realize 48 Hours was before. So if that's the case, then that was his big screen debut.
I'm pretty sure that was his big.
Well,
and
and
he
I
shared
think that's what
billing.
made him probably the main star in this one.
I think so. He was probably under the undercard with Nick Nolte in 48 Hours.
Yeah.
And I think, if I had to guess, I would bet he was like, you know, equal billing sort of with Dan Aykroyd.
You
Trading
think?
Places, but I would think so
know.
because Dan Aykroyd was still huge at that point. You know, he was
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
off Saturday Night Live. I don't remember. I think this was right about the same time as Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Spies Like
And
Us.
of course, that was later. Of course, he had Dr. Detroit.
Dr.
his,
Detroit.
on
With his
his
lovely
resume.
bride,
Donna Dixon.
Donna Dixon. Yeah.
Right?
So before
But
we,
yeah.
we get into Trading Places, you just mentioned it's one of the greatest New Year's films ever. And I said, well, you know, it technically could be a Christmas movie, but it's also a Thanksgiving movie. Because I was
covered a lot
just
of ground.
thinking about when he was in the in the jail talking trash about how he's a karate guy. You know, that big old fella comes walking over with that tall guy. He says, it ain't cool being no jive
Jive
so
turkey.
close to Thanksgiving. And the
That's
guy's
right.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this
Good one.
Thanksgiving, and it you know what? It's the holiday season movie for all.
God bless you, everyone.
It is the holiday season. There was probably a little Kwanzaa reference in there.
Well, you know, the movie starts out with a miracle.
That's right. He can see and he
And
has
walk.
legs.
I have legs. I can see.
I can see! I can see! I have legs! I have oh shit! Look at this! Man! I can walk! Jesus! Praise Jesus!
And so
You know
that
what?
was
Ironically, the most quoted, I would say that in my relationship with my lovely wife, there's probably a quote from that movie that gets thrown out between the two of us more than any other movie quote. And it's when when Dan Aykroyd's fiance is in the police station to pick him up.
That's your purse?
Yes.
Is that your purse?
Yes.
That's a nice purse.
Is that your purse? Yes.
Yes.
That's a nice
That's a
purse.
nice purse. Remind me, if you will, how was Dan Aykroyd chosen as the
fall guy?
the fall guy? I'm trying to remember. I mean, he really was living high on the hog. Maybe he was close to becoming partner. You know, he
I
had the
think it was
beautiful
that.
fiance. He had the butler, the chauffeur. So maybe it was
Yeah.
trying to say we can take this guy that has everything going for him and take this other guy
I
that has
think-
nothing going for him.
Well, see, I think he was kind of the protege of one of the Duke brothers. I can't remember if it was Don Amici or Ralph Bellamy.
Okay.
And the other one just kind of, liked him also, but said, if he didn't have the, access to the things that he has, he'd be, the same as any other bum on the street. And then they sort of had the opportunity to test that out when they kind of had the run-in with
Valentine.
Billy Ray Valentine, was that his name? Billy Ray
Probably
looking
something
good,
like
Billy
that.
Ray, feeling good, Winthrop. Yeah, that's
Feeling
Billy
good.
Ray
Lewis,
Valentine.
it's Lewis and Billy Ray,
Lewis.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
Winthrop and Valentine.
But so yeah, he came and kind of ran into him, and then ended up being ushered into the big boardroom, right? And then they were able to sort of plant some money on Winthrop.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, he went to jail, I think, directly after that. They bailed him out of jail.
Yeah.
And remember, he was sitting in the back seat of the car, and the chauffeur was driving, and they offer him like a cigar,
Right.
and he takes like all of them, and then they offer him like some brandy or something, and then he says something to the driver, it wasn't this, but basically, are these guys legit? They said nope. This is. He didn't say legit, but yeah, this is legit. And I remember when he first walked into the big room, the big house he had, he was asking, "I take your coat?" And he's like, "No, it's my coat."
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how they
And then
picked him. You're right. And
He's stuffing his pockets. And what does he say when when he goes to get a bath? And he sees his bathtub.
if he wanted bubbles at that part,
Yeah. Yeah, when I was growing up, if you wanted a jacuzzi, you had to fight in the bathtub.
you had a fought in the bathtub. When you think of love, does your heart beat around and round? At that point, they knew that they had made the right choice.
For
And so
sure.
how did they? Okay, so you're right. They framed Winthrop with cocaine, I think. Oh no! Someone stole some money, and there was a big X on some of the bills.
Right, and you had to
Beaker,
reach into the pocket
of the person next to you. Yeah,
Right.
And then you flipped it over, and Beaker, who was their
Kind of their
security,
henchman.
if you will, the head of security, who was also Mr. Vernon on the Breakfast Club. He was the one that
Breakfast
kind of
Club.
came over, and as soon as they turned over that red X, he was busted. And of course, Winthrop had no idea what was going on, right?
Right. So wonderful movie. At the end, that gave us the line that we used at the beginning about Merry New Year.
Towards the
And
middle, but yeah. Towards the end, you're right.
As towards the end.
You're right.
And then the aforementioned Mr. Gleason, or Mr. Vernon, ends up in a gorilla suit furnished by a very inebriated Jim Belushi, who was a party goer on the train.
Do you remember?
And ends
Okay, go ahead.
Well, he ends up being thrown into the cage with the real gorilla that was being transported on this train, also by Franken and Davis.
That's what I was about to say. They were the caretaker of the gorilla.
The future senator from Minnesota.
So I think when when they said, "Hey, let's see what happens if we put these two gorillas together," I think the two of them were like, "Hey, this is a good idea. Why not?" Right?
Right.
And
then you never see exactly what happened, but you see the guy's eyes in the monkey suit get real big. So
I think they might have said something like, "I think he's horny," and then it got real big, like, "Oh, I'm in trouble." But
so he hit a bullseye. It looks like.
You want to hear a funny story about bullseyes and eyes wide open?
I'm always up for a funny story.
Have you ever used a bidet?
I have not. We had a bidet in our house in England, but we sort of covered it up with like a little end table to keep the kids from using it as a drinking fountain. So no, I've never actually used one. Have you?
Wait, what do you mean? It was a separate apparatus?
Yeah, it was like a little separate apparatus, separate from the commode. It wasn't like built into the commode itself. And it shot a little stream of water. It looked very much like a drinking fountain, and we didn't plan on using it. We didn't want the kids messing with it, so we like put a table over it or something.
So before I go on with my story, what do you see as the purpose of a bidet?
It's a cleaner of your nether regions.
So why would you get off of the toilet with dirty nether regions to step over to another apparatus in order to clean it?
I didn't say I was that was in agreement with the principle.
No,
I think that it makes a lot more sense to have the bidet built into the actual commode. You're right. That transfer's got to be
it
ugly.
just doesn't make sense.
Then you got two bowls that need cleaning.
So, now they kind of have these ones that you just insert, you buy it in a box or whatever, you just insert it over. And I was at a buddy's house one time, and he had one, and he even said, hey, because here's what you do. Just, click this button, and it'll go on for like 2 minutes, and it'll be warm. It'll even change temperatures, and then at the end, it'll blow dry. I'm like, good Lord. I mean, I feel like I needed to buy a dinner. So I push the button, and I'm thinking, it's going to kind of agitate, that's not the word, but, spray almost like a mist type thing to where it's hitting all of your nether regions down there. This was like a pinpoint just stream of water. And it was hitting directly. I mean, you could not have centered that any better on the actual whatever.
Really?
I mean, I was sitting there thinking, if I was a clown at the carnival, a balloon would be coming out of my mouth and I would be fixing to win the prize. I have never seen such accuracy. William Tell could not have put an arrow through this stream. And
You're kidding me.
It was the craziest thing.
How does that even work?
I don't know.
Did you ask your friend, does it do that every time, or did you just happen to just sit in the right in the sights?
I'd used it again. It was normal. It was uncomfortable.
Did you have a balloon in your
mouth
that time?
I had a balloon somewhere to protect myself, but no, it was just the weirdest thing. And I don't know how we got off onto bidets, but I was on a bidet, and let me tell you, it was.
Oh gosh, that's funny.
Well, yeah, it was funny, but
I maybe haven't laughed that hard since I listened to Eddie Murphy Delirious.
I was about to say the same thing.
Were you?
Well, I was thinking the same thing earlier. We were talking about Eddie Murphy, whatnot, and he was kind of also the first ones that put out the comedy stand-up movie. There was Raw and there was Delirious, and the only one that I can think of prior to that, speaking of prior, was Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip.
Right.
But Eddie Murphy had two comedy specials in the movie theater.
Yeah. The other person that did one of those was Bill Cosby himself.
In the movie theater?
I want to say that was because it was like a full length, and that was good too. Pryor and Cosby, and then Eddie Murphy. I think really just took that to a whole new level. Because I mean, have there been any examples since then of
not that I can think of
comedians doing that? I don't think so.
And Eddie Murphy seemed to control the entire stage. I don't remember Richard Pryor, walking all the way around. And if we're talking about the same Bill Cosby thing, it almost seems like he was sitting in a chair.
He was sitting
spinning
in a chair.
yarns, and then he would stand up and kind of do his stand-up. And mind you, probably one of the greatest stand-up comedians ever. Tarnished, absolutely, but
absolutely
funny guy. So,
that's kind of an interesting topic because just talking about comedians, I've got some thoughts on that, and I think we grew up in an interesting time for comedy. It really kind of took a big turn there in the 80s, kind of along with Eddie Murphy. Maybe we should take a little break, come back after that and discuss.
Sounds good to me.
So, you know, we've talked about on the show before, like, our memories really start in the 70s, right? But we really hit our wheelhouse in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as comedy goes, you know, we were aware of some of the, like, comedy that came out of the 60s, and I would say that would include, like, your Bill Cosby. We had some of his comedy records that were just great.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know, like your Don Rickles and the things that we would see, like, on the Dean Martin roasts and all that.
We didn't appreciate the fact that they were stand-up comedians, but we knew they were funny. Yeah.
But then if you think about it, when you get into the point in time where we start being aware of what's going on, the comedy at that time was really questionable. I mean, there was the show Make Me Laugh. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Have you watched that recently?
Is it horrible?
You won't laugh.
No?
No, and you can't imagine why these people are having such a hard time not laughing. And I was thinking also about, do you remember there was a thing probably around 76, 77 that became like the catchphrase? It was, well, you can call me Ray, or you can call me Jay,
or
you can call me Johnny,
or you can call me Sonny. But you doesn't have to call me Johnson. Yeah, what was that?
I had to think about that. Like, why did that become so funny? I mean, that got a beer commercial. It was like, this is so funny, we need to put this on a beer ad, like a Natural Light ad. And I'm thinking to myself, what was the shtick there? So I went back and I watched it, and you know, I looked it up today just to see what it was. That was the shtick. You know, it would be basically like somebody would say, "Hey, how you doing there, Johnson?" And you say, "Hey, you can call me Ray." Or you can. That was the whole setup, the whole shtick. I don't know what it was. The guy's name, no offense to him, was Bill Saluga.
So is that no offense to him by you don't think he ever wants to be known as that guy anymore because it was so bad?
I mean, it became like the huge catchphrase of the day. Good on him. I mean,
good on him. Yeah.
I couldn't come up with something that kids that were 9 years old at that time would still remember when they're in their mid-50s. So it obviously had something going on. But I'm just thinking about it, like, was that really that funny? I don't know. And then, you know, the show that we used to really like to watch then was Bizarre on Showtime, but I don't know that it was the comedy we were after so much as a chance to see a boob.
Well, first of all, let me just clarify, there wasn't a chance. I mean,
you were going to see
a cut. Anytime the shirt scene came on, you were going, t-shirts. Oh, that was just...
But I mean, that really wasn't funny, but you did have one saving element on that show. What was that?
Well, it was Super Dave.
Super Dave, yeah.
But Bizarre was a sketch comedy show, though. So
yeah, that's true. It wasn't really stand-up.
No,
although John Biner would do a monologue.
Yeah. And then it turned into sketch comedy. And, of course, Super Dave Osborne, who, God, he's funny. He was so funny, and I just never even realized how funny he was. But getting back to the 70s, you know, when you think about Don Rickles and you think about the Dean Martin roast, we knew that Bill Cosby was a stand-up comedian, and we knew that, but it wasn't until the 80s, the early 80s, that it really stopped, because I don't remember Lenny Bruce, but I think I've heard that he was the first, like, shock comic. Like, he was trying to push the boundaries.
Right.
And another comic who pushed the boundaries was George Carlin. But if you watch his early stuff, he wasn't pushing the boundaries. He was clean cut, like he was doing like the weather or something.
He was the hippy dippy weatherman.
So was that dirty?
Well, I mean, it was edgy. Although when you watch it now, it's kind of like the Smothers Brothers were edgy. It's hard to imagine that they were edgy or that they were kind of like, pushing against the social norms or whatever. But they were.
But if they were edgy, then Lenny Bruce was just flat out.
I think. He said the things that George Carlin famously had the list of 7 words you can't say on television, stuff like that. But that was kind of the '60s, though. I mean, that came out of the '60s into the early '70s, and you had like your Bob Newharts and stuff like that. Really good comics in the time, but it just seems that it hit kind of a doldrum in the '70s, and then like the the best comedian was probably Gallagher, who was funny.
Probably. He was funny. He was so underrated. People, because he had a shtick, people underrated him. But if you listen to his comedy before he starts his physical comedy, he was kind of like Seinfeld in that
it was observational.
Very observational and very funny, and has let himself go. And if we ever, do a video podcast, I can show you a picture. We went and saw him, and we went and saw him at like a coffee shop, and at
Do-si-Do's.
At Do-si-Do. It's a nice venue, but I kind of felt bad. But he was so funny still. I'll tell that story later because it does involve 80s. But you're right. In the 70s, we kind of lost the stand-up. Even though, again, I don't remember the stand-up in the 70s. But I would have to say mid-80s, stand-up became the thing.
It did. And I think it started like at the end of the 70s. You mentioned Pryor. Mm-hmm. And then you had like Steve Martin and like Robin Williams that were starting to emerge.
Yes.
And I think that kind of ushered things in. Then you kind of had like Rodney Dangerfield kind of got his whole I get no respect thing coming in. And then that probably started kind of in the mid-70s, I think. But then, then he took that and turned it around to trying to discover new comics and started having those kind of annual specials
which were fantastic. One in particular. Great. But before we touch on those, I want to touch on Steve Martin real quick. And I've got a restraining order against me because I wanted to touch on him. But anyway, dear. He's one of these guys that if you see him in movies today, he's hilarious. But if you tell people that only know him from movies today to go watch his stand-up, they would not believe how crazy that guy was. I mean, he was a physical comedian who, I don't remember him being dirty per se.
He was subtly, very subtly dirty. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She had the best. I'm talking about her cat. Come on, you make me.
So it seems like when Dangerfield started having those specials is the first time I remember seeing the brick wall behind the comedians, which is now kind of the stand-up staple.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But comedy clubs became huge. There's a couple. The
Laugh
Improv
Factory.
Yeah. I mean, that's where all the big names went. Still do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They go there to hone their acts and all that. But yeah, it just got really good. I mean, just because it was
very good.
It was so different from anything that we had heard before, and it was kind of like, it was a bit of a departure from the stuff that your parents thought was funny and the stuff that you thought was funny. I guess every generation gets that to some extent. But it just seemed like it just took hold unbelievably, and probably in large part because of things like, the Dangerfield specials and Saturday Night Live, and getting all these comedians who made the leap from standing in front of the microphone behind the microphone in front of the brick wall to having their own sitcoms and stuff. That
I
kind of
agree
late
with that.
80s to 90s.
I'll agree with that, but I will also say that any of them who had a TV show or whatnot, if you were to ask them, you can choose one or the other. Either you're a famous stand-up or they say stand-up. That's what they prefer to do.
It's like a drug.
It is like a drug, and I think that guys like Seinfeld were the ones that actually made it a career. That he would tell the young comedians, unless you spend 8 hours a day working on your set, then you're not going to make it. You need to treat it as a job and not just, I'm going to go perform for 2 hours a night. You have to hone your craft. And I think that's when just stand-up comedy just became Tim Allen, for example. I mean, have you ever watched his stand-up? It's hilarious. Yeah. Based, Home Improvement's definitely based on a character of his, but Seinfeld was so good, and I just don't see Steve Martin doing stand-up now. He was just more of a sold-out crowd, one-man show.
Well, and I think that really kind of turned him off on it because he became so big that he would make fun of that. Like he would come out and be playing to this 14,000 seat arena, and he would say, "I'm going to show you this card trick," you know, and he'd sit there on the stage like his little ant on the stage, you know, doing close-up magic.
Right.
But yeah, I think that just really turned him off.
Yeah.
From it, because he basically just walked away from it and never went back. Never looked back.
Right.
Not that he needed to, and he became one of the most successful sort of leading man, comedy,
I'd say comedy and
dramatic
drama,
actor. Yeah.
That is crazy. You know, there's a lot of comedians from the 70s and maybe early 80s that your Seinfelds and your a lot of your main guys will say that these were the guys that paved the way, and it would be like your Robert Klein, and it would be like your Larry Charles, I think is his name.
No, it's yeah, I know who you're talking about. Was it Larry Miller?
Larry Miller.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. George Miller. I never heard of the guy yet. David Letterman and Norm Macdonald think he's the greatest comedian in the history of the world, and I've gone out and watched some stuff, and I didn't think it was that funny, but I just think he just never gave up.
Well, David Letterman was one of these guys that kind of came out of the end of the 70s. It was in the beginning of the 80s. His stuff, it was just so different, the way that he was so sarcastic. And it was like the changing of the guard from Johnny Carson, you know, straightforward kind of 60s to 70s, and then here come the irreverent kind of random 80s. Yeah.
Well, then you had guys that did push the envelope, like Andrew Dice Clay and Sam Kinison.
What else am I gonna do when I'm standing in line at the bank? Go!
Oh,
do I know
Muffet.
you?
I mean, they were just filthy. And in fact, Nora Dunn refused to shoot an episode of Saturday Night Live in which Andrew Dice Clay was the host. She sat out that week.
Oh my gosh. And now Andrew Dice Clay plays like the fatherly figure, kind of the aging father. So funny.
Right? I can just see it.
I mean, yeah, if Sam Kinison was still alive today, he'd be playing the Wilford Brimley role or something like that, you know?
I could just see Andrew Dice Clay being like the grandfather figure, you know, in a thing. It's like, hey, sweetheart, lay down. Let me read you a couple of poems to lay your head down. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet. The dad comes running in. No! Yet he's actually telling the actual fairy tale now, but
that's right. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. It was old Mother Hubbard went to her cupboard
to give her poor dog a bone. When she bent over, old Rover Drover, and said, "Here's a bone of my own."
Bone of his own.
Oh, oh, brother. But then the Cos turned into a sitcom. Seinfeld turned into a sitcom. Drew Carey turned into a sitcom.
Think about
Roseanne, who was on that one of those
Rodney
Dangerfield things. I remember she was hilarious. In fact, that particular one had like her. I think might have had like Louis Anderson.
Yeah.
And
did it have Yakov Smirnoff?
A lot of country. He was hilarious.
He was great. America loves Smirnoff. I think, what a country.
I think he might have been on that. There was this one guy on it that I don't think ever made it, who was the funniest guy on there, about like, this is the football team.
Yeah. My shoulder, my pads.
Because of the football, I play football.
Number 72. Oh, shit. 27.
That guy was good, but stand-up is... Where do you put it now?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I'm not gonna say. I mean, I can watch stand-up comedy on TV, and I'm going to laugh.
Yeah.
But it's it's almost it's too shock driven, and a lot of it is just like girls trying to see if they can say something that you just can't believe they would say.
Sometimes I think female comics feel like they need to outgross you and I'm like, God, you're so funny. Why do you have to say that?
Yeah, I mean, think about like, you know, when Ellen DeGeneres was a stand-up, she was awesome, and she was not dirty.
No, she was very clean. She was a very good stand-up comic.
Yeah,
and
so funny.
Some of these girls you see now, I mean, Nikki Glaser, Sarah Silverman, they're funny, but they just feel like they have to take it to a place where, and really, it's making themselves look bad. You know, they talk about sexual things and stuff like that, but that happened to them. You know, it's like, oh, so what if I do this? I mean, they're funny. I don't know why, but I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Give me Brian Regan any day.
Give me Brian Regan. Give me Jim Gaffigan. You ready for this? Give me Larry the Cable Guy. I think that son of a gun is funny.
He can be filthy. He can be filthy,
but he is funny.
He is funny. He is funny.
Foxworthy's funny. But yeah, there can be some filthy ones.
Well, then like somebody like Daniel Tosh. Like I don't watch that show very often, but there was a time where I did, and it was always funny.
Yeah, his stand-up's awesome too.
Somebody who's not particularly dirty, who's very good, is Dimitri Martin.
Very good.
You seen him? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. It's always just going to be I guess each generation kind of just has to find a voice that kind of does not appeal to the generation that's sort of handing over the reins, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the role of comedy, although, you know, you got to wonder, at this point it's become so neutered because of political correctness. I mean, I guess that's what turns us off. You know, that's what turns our generation off, is just the complete political correctness of it. But I guess you can find a way to make that funny, and it also, you know, just funny because, you know, it kind of pisses off your parents. Maybe that's the role that it's playing.
Well, you'll hear a lot of your stand-up comics talk about how political correctness is pushing them out.
Well, like our generation, like the Seinfelds, and they're like, you know, it used to be going to a college campus was the best place to go and try out new comedy. Now you cannot. You know, you cannot say anything. But, you know, maybe that's the way they drive that generation out, and let's bring in our people, you know, and they're going to provide us something that fits with our cultural sensibilities.
Well,
for us it was disgusting nursery rhymes, right?
Right.
That's what drove out the Rickles and the Gallaghers and all that, and
but they didn't offend us personally.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, now you get offended personally. You know, you have to be so PC and everything, but the people who demand PC, they have the thinnest skin of any people out there.
Oh, yeah.
So in other words, it's not like, hey, we prefer you not to say this. It's, if you say this, your career's over.
We are going to dox you. We are going to let everybody know where you live. We're going to try to get you fired from your job, Roseanne.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't like things being off limits like that. I think there are things that everybody knows are off limits, and people try to say them for shock value, and they're not funny. But I think there should still be a lot of stuff that is.
You want to know what I think? I just thought of something that I think was probably more unlikely than the incredible degree of accuracy that you described from your bidet experience, and that is how did we get through a discussion about? Oh, we did mention Norm Macdonald once with regards to, but I think you and I would both say that he's, if not the top of our list, very close to the top of our list.
I don't think there's a close second. Yeah. I really don't. Only because of, I mean, he's different than other comedians. Only because he does it exactly like a comedian should. You know, coat and tie, he just does stand-up. But if you've ever watched some of his stuff, like, did you ever watch the sports show?
Oh, yeah.
And they've got those on YouTube. They are so funny. He'll push the envelope.
So great. There's nothing better than when you get like him and Dennis Miller and Kevin Nealon and Dana
David
Carvey
Spade.
together, David Spade.
Yeah.
They just feed off each other so well. And
they do.
Those are the ones that just can't seem, they just can't believe the political correctness. The person who, although I guess David Spade and Kevin Nealon have done a pretty decent job of kind of bridging that.
Have they? I mean, the Norm doesn't care. He's going to say what he wants to say.
No, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I like about Norm. Not because he's willing to say things to offend people, but he's willing to say things that are funny, hoping it won't offend people because it's funny. So.
Yeah, you think we ought to end this segment with a dad joke?
Oh, absolutely. So one time I was playing golf with Dad, and a dad joke, not a joke about Dad.
Oh, tell us a joke about Dad, and then I'll finish us off with a dad joke.
I'd prefer you to do the dad joke.
All right.
Basically,
I always liked this one. It's not a real obvious one, but I always liked this one. Say, and we could make it about Pops.
Okay.
Now talking to my kids, kids, your grandfather has the heart of a lion, and now a lifetime ban from the zoo.
Oh, brother.
Kind of like that one.
I kind of like that one. That's all right.
Yeah,
it wasn't too bad.
That's a way homer.
A way homer?
You only get it on the way home.
That's a pretty good one, I guess. One of your more morbid dad jokes, but
it's a little morbid.
A dad joke nonetheless. The heart of a lion.
And a lifetime ban from the zoo.
Well, we probably just offended the WWF.
The World Wrestling Federation?
Yes, George the Animal Steel will not like that.
No.
It's time for closing thoughts with Jeff. And now, here's Jeff.
Political correctness has changed the way we live, and it seems to get stricter by the day. But no area has been affected quite like comedy. Today's stand-up comedians have to be so careful what they say or risk their career. In fact, even their past bits now come back to haunt them. And that's the real problem. Trying to be PC is like trying to hit a moving target. What you say today might be considered taboo tomorrow. Trust me, we've actually cut out jokes from this podcast that, looking back, really were benign. But the definition of PC changed in my mind earlier this week when Representative Emanuel Cleaver chose to end a prayer on the floor of Congress by saying "Amen" and "AWOMEN." Not only was that one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, it also struck me as a very un-PC comment that would offend many groups in our country today. While trying to sound cool, to me it sounded more like a blatant remark that there are only two genders that matter, amen and a woman. I know many people who have worked very hard to change that misconception, and I believe Representative Cleaver has set political correctness back many decades, but may have saved the face of comedy. Until next time, Steve Martin said it best, comedy isn't pretty.
Thank you for listening to the Just Jeff and the Dazzlingly Uncool podcast. Check back every Thursday for new episodes. If there's a topic you think we should discuss on the podcast, leave us a comment or a message and we'll do our best to get to it. Check us out on Facebook and join our group called Growing Up 70s and 80s Texas Style. Didn't grow up in the 70s or the 80s? No problem. Didn't grow up in Texas? No problem. We still want you in the group and as part of the discussion. Hey, do you think you yourself may be dazzlingly uncool? Well, if you found your way to our podcast, chances are pretty good, or at least that you will be one day. Wear that title with pride. To find out more, check out www.rockysealmusic.com.
Good Lord.